At WinOwl we tell stories that don't always end well, but almost always end up being true for someone. Stories that sting, that stir up old things, that force you to look in the mirror even when you'd rather not. If that's the kind of story you're drawn to, I invite you to subscribe right now to the WinOwl channel, hit like on this video, and share it with that person you know is carrying their own secret story. What you're about to hear today is not a pretty tale. It's the confession of a man who turned a broken heart into an earthquake in his company, and of a woman who learned to use pain as strategy. A ruined wedding, an ex-lover dressed almost exactly like the bride, a corporate scandal, a company going under, a cold, surgical revenge. And in the end, the question that haunted me for years: did I deserve everything that happened to me, or did she cross a line? Stay with me until the end and then you tell me. But first, subscribe to WinOwl, drop a like right now so more people can find these stories, and share it with someone who once mixed love with business. Believe me, I'm not the only one who's been this stupid. I'm going to speak calmly. No shouting, no theatrics. Because when pain settles in, it gets quieter, more analytical. And it hurts in a different way. Sometimes punishment arrives so perfectly designed that it feels like justice. Or surgery. Or revenge. Even now, I don't know which of the three it was that Susan did to me. My name is David Bradley, though everyone calls me Brad. And for many years I was the kind of man who liked to brag he could handle it all: partners, contracts, trips, women. You know the type, the expensive suit, the shiny watch, that winner's way of talking. When I met Susan, I didn't have any of that. We were just two more employees in a company that doesn't even exist anymore. She wore a simple blouse, a skirt you wouldn't look at twice, but her mind, that always walked into any room before her body did. Back then, I was good at selling smoke. She was good at building the fire. Have you ever met someone who makes you feel that, if they just sit down next to you, the world is a little more in order? That's what Susan was for me. She was methodical, precise, with a calm I mistook for coldness at first. But when she really laughed, when something genuinely surprised her, her eyes lit up and, without realizing, she would let her hair down. That little gesture, that gesture caught me more than any low-cut neckline ever could. We started out as colleagues. Then accomplices. Then partners. And much later, we were engaged. The first time I kissed her wasn't romantic. No flowers, no perfect dinner. It was at the office, on a Thursday, 11 at night, monitors still on, papers all over the table, and that heavy, exhausted kind of silence. I was standing behind her, looking at a report on her screen. I could smell her perfume, something with vanilla and something citrus that always seemed to cling to her clothes. I leaned in a bit to point at a number, and my hand brushed against hers on the keyboard. She didn't move away. She took a deep breath, very slowly, and her shoulder brushed my chest. I felt the air change, like the light of the monitor had shifted into something warmer, more intimate. "Brad," she said, without turning around, "if we keep staring at these numbers, we're going to make a mistake." She wasn't talking about the report. When she turned in her chair, we ended up almost at the same height. Her lips were close, her gaze steady, but in her eyes I saw something I never saw in anyone else: assessment. She was measuring me not just as a man, but as a decision. I was the one who closed the distance. And I did it with the feeling that I was signing something far bigger than a kiss. Have you ever felt that a kiss ties you down more than a contract? With Susan, every choice had weight. Over time, we left the company where we'd met and started our own. A financial consulting firm that began in a tiny apartment and ended up taking over 2 floors of a glass building. She was the cold mind, the strategist; I was the friendly face, the man for presentations and client dinners. In public, I was the one who shone. In private, it was her. We got engaged one night after closing a massive deal. There was no kneeling on the floor, no prepared speech. Just a ring that had been burning a hole in my pocket for weeks, and this absurd fear that she might say no because she already had all of me in every other way. But she said yes. She hugged me tight, buried her face in my neck and just stayed there, still, breathing. I felt her chest rise and fall against mine. The warmth of her body seeping through my shirt. And I thought that this was the place I wanted to stay for the rest of my life. That's what I believed back then. And this is where Scarlett walks in. Scarlett was my ex long before Susan. Let's call it, more impulsive phase of my life. She was the complete opposite, chaotic where Susan was methodical, loud laughter where Susan was a restrained smile, improvisation where Susan was a plan. With Scarlett there were no signatures, there were nights. No strategy, just instinct. The way she touched, the way she came closer, the way she bit her lip when she wanted something, everything about her was fast-burning fire, with no consequences, or so I thought. When we broke up, it was ugly, but final. Or that's what I chose to believe. Years later, life, with its pretty cruel sense of humor, threw her back in front of us. Scarlett had turned herself into some kind of image and public relations consultant for companies. And one of our clients brought her into a meeting. I watched her walk into the boardroom like it was a staged scene, tight dress, heels marking a rhythm on the floor, hair loose over her shoulders. Her eyes found mine in a matter of seconds. She smiled. It was a brief smile, the kind only people with a shared past really understand. Well, Bradley, she said when they introduced us, pretending to be surprised. Small world. Susan, sitting beside me, shook her hand calmly. I felt a subtle shift in her posture, almost imperceptible, like she straightened her back by a millimeter or two. In her language, that was full alert. I've heard about you, Susan said. Good references. In that sentence, in that tone, all her intelligence was packed in. She didn't ask anything. She didn't show jealousy. She just filed the information away. Scarlett, my ex, now orbiting around our company. What would you have done in that moment? Lay it all out? Make a joke about the past? Downplay it? I did the worst possible thing. I pretended it wasn't important. With time, Scarlett started showing up more and more in our routines. At first, in meetings with the client. Then, quick coffees to improve the communication strategy. Then, late-night messages. I'm not going to lie to you, I liked it. It wasn't love, it was ego. It was that stupid thrill of feeling desired by two very different women. Susan, the partner, the fiancée, the one who knew exactly which account every cent was in. Scarlett, the old temptation, the reminder of a time when I didn't owe anyone any explanations. One night, on a business trip, the line finally broke. We were in another city for an important presentation. The client had been impressed, and we ended up celebrating at the hotel bar. Susan wasn't there, she'd stayed at the office, wrapping up something with an investor. I remember the low lights in the bar, the soft music, the glass of whiskey in my hand. Scarlett sat very close, too close for what we were supposed to be. Her knee brushed mine under the table. You look more serious than before, Bradley, she whispered. More contained. It's called growing up, I said. She smiled, leaning forward. The neckline of her dress shifted just a little, and the shadow of her skin in the dim light caught my attention more than it should have. Or it's called fear, she said. Fear of losing what you've built. Her hand touched mine, just for a second, but long enough to change my breathing. I felt that old fire, that energy she'd always known how to spark. The smell of her perfume, sweeter than Susan's, mixed with the alcohol and with the guilt starting to pool in my stomach. We went up in the elevator. There was no need to say anything. The silence was loaded, her shoulder brushing mine, her hair grazing the edge of my jacket when she leaned in to press the button. Our reflection in the elevator mirror showed our bodies far too close to be just colleagues. I'm not going to spell out what happened next. There's no need. I'll just tell you this, there was a door I didn't even have to lock, and I still crossed the threshold. Do you think betrayal begins with a kiss, or with a much smaller, much quieter decision? I went back to my room late, shirt wrinkled, heart racing, and the sick feeling that something had broken in a place that doesn't heal easily. The next day, I talked to Susan over video call. She looked tired, her hair pulled up in a quick bun, her blouse slightly unbuttoned from the heat in the office. Her voice sounded relieved because the investor situation was going well. I miss you, she said, resting her elbow on the desk. When you're back, we need to go over the contract and pick the wedding flowers. She smiled at me, that small, restrained smile that was just for me. I looked into the camera and felt a stab in my chest. I lied. I told her I loved her. I told her I couldn't wait for our wedding day to arrive. And the worst part is, it was partly true. What happened with Scarlett should have stayed as one night, one stupid mistake. But it didn't. One message led to another, one meeting to the next, until cheating stopped being an accident and became a pattern. A badly kept secret. Susan didn't say anything. She didn't ask too many questions. But I know her. I knew something wasn't adding up for her: schedules, looks, silences. One afternoon, while we were working in the conference room, she crossed her legs under the table and looked straight at me. She was wearing a simple, dark blue dress, the kind of outfit that made her look more powerful without even trying. "Brad," she said, "are you sure you want to marry me?" Her tone was so neutral it hurt. There was no accusation, no drama. Just a question, like someone double-checking a number. "Of course," I answered, without hesitation. "Why are you asking?" She held my gaze for a few seconds more. Then she lowered her eyes back to the documents. "Because you're distracted," she said. "And when you get distracted, I lose money." She said it with a half-smile, as if it were a joke. But it wasn't. Would you have confessed everything right then? Or would you have done what I did, keep betting on nobody finding out? The wedding day finally came. It was in an elegant venue, nothing over the top, but flawless. White flowers, soft music, guests blurring the line between personal and professional, family, friends, partners, important clients. Our company, at that point, was almost an extension of our relationship. Getting married was, in a way, also a corporate statement. I was at the entrance, greeting people, when I saw her. Scarlett. I will never forget that moment. She walked in like the room was a runway, wearing a long, satin, ivory-colored dress. Almost white. Very similar to the wedding dress I knew Susan was wearing upstairs in the hotel room. People turned their heads. Some smiled, others frowned. The resemblance wasn't an accident. The cut of the dress, the way it hugged her body, the neckline modest but provocative, everything seemed engineered for one single purpose: to compete with the bride. She walked toward me with a confidence that rattled me. When she reached my side, she tilted her head. "Easy, Bradley," she whispered. "I'm just here to watch." Her perfume hit me head-on. I felt a cold sweat run down the back of my neck. "Scarlett, this is inappropriate," I managed to say. "You shouldn't." "Relax," she replied, smiling. "In the end, we all know appearances are what matter most in business, right?" She went to sit at one of the front tables, near the main aisle. Suffice it to say, everyone saw her. I don't know who was the first to take a picture. I don't know who was the first to lean over and whisper into someone's ear. "Isn't that Brad's ex? Doesn't her dress look a little too much like a wedding dress?" The murmur started soft, but I heard it like a roar. The ceremony was about to begin when Susan appeared in the doorway of the hall. I saw her in white, radiant, but restrained as always. The dress fit her perfectly, no excess, with delicate lace along her shoulders and back. Her hair was pulled back in a simple style, a few loose strands softening her face. When she walked in, everyone turned toward her. And then, inevitably, toward Scarlett. That was the moment. The visual collision. The comparison. Susan saw Scarlett's dress. Saw where she was sitting. Saw the looks. Our eyes met across the room. And in that split second I knew that everything I'd hidden had suddenly become far too visible. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't make a scene. She just walked slowly down the aisle, bouquet in hand, looking at people. Watching. Processing. The way she always did with numbers. When she reached me, she took my arm. Her hand was cold. The officiant started to speak. I barely heard a word. I felt like I was standing on a very thin plank, suspended over a huge emptiness. If anyone has anything to say. He began the ritual phrase, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence lasted less than I would have liked. From one of the tables, someone I never knew who made a comment under their breath, but loud enough for several people to catch it. Pretty wild coincidence about that dress, huh? That murmur spread like ink in water. Some people let out a nervous laugh. Others, discreetly, glanced over at Scarlett, who never took her eyes off me. Susan stopped looking at the officiant. She turned toward me, slowly, like something was finally snapping into place in her head. Is it a coincidence, Brad? She asked, so softly only I could hear her. Her gaze was surgical. No. It was accounting. She was crossing columns, adding, subtracting, arriving at a result she'd probably had in front of her for a while, but hadn't wanted to accept. I swallowed. Susan, I couldn't finish the sentence. She stepped back, still facing everyone. Excuse me, she said calmly. I think there's information here I didn't have when I agreed to stand at this altar. She turned to the officiant. I can't get married today. The whole room just lost its air. There was a wave of whispers, a couple of muffled gasps, someone dropped a glass. I felt my face burning, my hands shaking. Susan, please, let's talk. I tried to move toward her. She took another step back and raised a hand, her eyes locked on mine. Brad, she said, I am not going to argue with you in front of clients, partners, and employees. Let's not mix things. And that's when I understood. For her, this wasn't just a romantic betrayal anymore. It was a problem of reputation, of image, of the company. She turned and walked toward the exit with the same dignity with which she'd walked in. The white dress trailing lightly over the carpet, the bouquet still in her hand, but she wasn't even gripping it. Scarlett shot up from her chair like a spring. Brad! She murmured as she came toward me. I didn't think that. Shut up, I said, without looking at her. I don't remember ever feeling that much shame in my life. Do you think there is a dignified way to fix something like that? Or by that point is everything already lost, and has been for a while? What followed was a slow fall. Within hours, the scandal jumped from the guests to the rest of the world. Pictures of the failed wedding, of the ex almost dressed as a bride, of Susan's face as she left the hall with her chin held high. Within days, some clients started calling with that worried tone. We want to understand what happened, if the company is stable, if you two are still partners. The answer was, no. Susan was cold. Precise. As strategic as ever, but now with a different target. In less than a week, she asked for a meeting not to talk about the wedding, but about the company. She summoned me to the office, to the boardroom where we'd once dreamed up so many plans. I walked in with a knot in my stomach. She was there, standing by the window, in a perfectly tailored dark suit, hair pulled back, face free of any heavy makeup. Just a subtle lipstick that contrasted with her hard expression. Sit down, she said. Her voice was neutral. Not a hint of a tremor. There were several documents laid out on the table. I recognized them instantly, balance sheets, contracts, partnership agreements. And on top of everything, a folder with the word proposal written by hand. I don't want to go to court, she began. It would be exhausting for both of us. It would be bad for the company. And frankly, I don't have time to waste on you more than necessary. Each word was a clean cut. I want us to separate as partners, she went on. And I want us to settle our personal engagement once and for all. Susan, I'm not interested in hearing you try to defend the indefensible, Brad, she cut in, finally looking me in the eye. I've already run my numbers. She pushed the folder toward me. I opened it. It was an agreement. Perfectly crafted, almost beautiful from a technical standpoint. She was giving up her shares in the company in exchange for a significant financial settlement. The amount was high, but not insane. I could manage it if I restructured a few things. On paper, she was leaving the company. On paper, I was the one coming out ahead. I kept full control of the business we'd built together. But Susan never did appearances without substance. "Why do you want out?" I asked, trying to sound steady. "Because I don't trust you," she replied, without blinking. "And I don't want your lack of self-control to stain my professional reputation. I can start something else from scratch." "You?" "I'm not so sure." That last part she said with a slight tilt of her head, like an offhand remark. But it went straight through me. "If I sign this," I said, "you walk away with a lot of money." "Fair," she corrected. "It's exactly what I'm owed for my work and for the years I put into this. Not a cent more, not a cent less." "And I keep the company," I insisted. "You keep the company," she confirmed. "The name, the clients, the structure, and the scandal." A heavy silence settled between us. There it was, the trap. Clear. Elegant. Legal. "The scandal will cool down," I said, more out of pride than conviction. "People get used to everything." Susan placed both hands on the table and leaned slightly toward me. I felt her physical presence, the nearness of her body, the faint scent of her perfume. It wasn't seduction. It was power. "It's not going to cool down for you," she whispered. "Because you're the face. The one in the photos. The one who put himself on display on the wedding day. I can disappear. I can reappear with another project, somewhere else, with people who respect my work." She straightened up. "You stay here, dealing with everything. If you think you can handle it, sign." Would you have signed? I did. I did it out of pride, out of fear of losing the company, out of refusal to admit I destroyed something that doesn't come back with an apology. I did it because, deep down, there was a part of me that still believed everything could be managed, like always. I signed. I handed her the pen a little too fast, as if that could prove it didn't hurt. She took the documents, stacked them neatly, and slipped them back into the folder. "The notary is already informed," she said. "This will be formal in 2 days." She walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped. "Brad," she added, without turning around, "just so you're clear, this isn't revenge. It's protection." Then she left. And I stayed alone in that room with the feeling that I'd handed over something more than a signature. With time, I realized there was revenge in it. But it was a revenge so cold, so carefully wrapped in rationality, it could easily be mistaken for justice. The months that followed were a silent hell. Without Susan, the company started to show its cracks. I knew how to sell, sure. I knew how to inspire confidence in meetings, give firm handshakes, look people in the eye. But underneath that, there were numbers, processes, structures she handled with an ease I'd never fully appreciated. Important clients started asking for follow-up meetings, questioning decisions, delaying payments. Some of them simply left. The story of the failed wedding turned into a kind of corporate urban legend. There were all sorts of versions, but they all shared the same thread: an unprofessional partner who mixed his personal life with business and ended up dragging everything down. Scarlett, at first, stayed. She came with me to some meetings, kissed me in private as if nothing mattered, laughed at the drama. "People forget fast," she'd say, running her fingers along my neck, bringing her lips close to my ear. "What matters is you keep your head up." Her body was still an easy refuge, intense, a place where I could switch off the guilt for a while. Nights with her were a mix of need and escape, shared sweat and uncomfortable silences afterward. But reality doesn't switch off in bed. When the financial statements started looking truly ugly, when I had to fire people, when cash flow began to choke, Scarlett changed. Her messages became less frequent. Her visits to the office, more spaced out. One night, while I was going through invoices in my apartment, she texted, "Brad, we need to talk." The classic line. The one that never brings anything good. She showed up a bit later. Tight jeans, a light blouse, and that way of moving I'd always found dangerous. She sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and looked at me with a mix of pity and exhaustion. I don't want to go down with the ship, she said, no preamble. I'm saying it like this because I know you hate beating around the bush. Is that what we are? A sinking ship? I asked, feeling anger climb up inside me. That's what your company is, she replied. You're something else. But I can't stay tied to a name that now means scandal and bad management. Bad management? I repeated, stung. All of this happened because of the wedding, because. Don't kid yourself, Brad, she cut in. The wedding was the spark. But the problem is you thought you were untouchable. You let everything revolve around you. Susan made this work. You made it look pretty. She said it in an almost affectionate tone, and that made it hurt even more. Someone reached out to me, she added after a pause. An investment fund. They want to get into the sector, buy struggling companies, restructure them. They asked about you. They contacted you? I asked. She hesitated for a second. That was enough to know she wasn't telling me everything. I'm good at making connections, Bradley, she said. And you, right now, you're a story nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole. I stayed quiet. I'm going to work with them, she concluded. I can't stay here. She stood up, walked over, and kissed me on the forehead. A gesture almost tender, almost sibling-like. No fire. I'm sorry, she whispered. You're a man who did this to himself. I just passed through. And she left. Do you think people stay when everything collapses? Some do, I know. But many don't. Me, at that point, I was alone. The company finally sank a few months later. Unpayable debts, lawsuits, furious suppliers. The brand that had once been a synonym for growth became a textbook example of how not to mix your personal life with your business. But Susan never did surface without depth underneath. Why do you want to step out? I asked, trying to sound firm. Because I don't trust you, she replied, without a blink. And I don't want your personal chaos dragging down my professional reputation. I can start something else from scratch. You? I'm not so sure. That last part she said with a slight tilt of her head, like a side comment. But it cut straight through me. If I sign this, I said, you walk away with a lot of money. Fair, she clarified. It's exactly what I'm owed for my work and for the years I put into this. Not a cent more, not a cent less. And I keep the company, I pushed. You keep the company, she confirmed. The name, the clients, the structure, and the scandal. A heavy silence fell between us. There it was, the trap. Clear. Elegant. Legal. The scandal will blow over, I said, more pride than conviction. People get used to everything. Susan set both hands on the table and leaned slightly toward me. I felt her physical presence, the closeness of her body, the faint scent of her perfume. It wasn't seduction. It was power. It's not going to blow over for you, she whispered. Because you're the visible face. The one in the photos. The one who put himself on display on the wedding day. I can disappear. I can reappear with another project, somewhere else, with people who respect my work. She straightened. You stay here, dealing with everything. If you think you can, sign. Would you have signed? I did. I did it out of pride, out of fear of losing the company, out of refusal to accept I destroyed something that doesn't come back with sorry. I did it because, deep down, a part of me still believed everything could be managed, like always. I signed. I shoved the pen back at her, as if that could prove it didn't hurt. She gathered up the documents, aligned them carefully, and slipped them into the folder. The notary's already been briefed, she said. This becomes official in 2 days. She headed for the door. Before leaving, she paused. Brad, she added, without turning back, just so there's no doubt, what I'm doing isn't revenge. It's protection. And she left. I stayed there alone in that room, with the feeling I'd given away more than just a signature. With time, I realized there was revenge in it. But it was a revenge so cold, so neatly wrapped in rationality, it could easily pass for justice. The next few months were a quiet kind of hell. Without Susan, the company started to show its cracks. I knew how to sell, sure. I knew how to inspire confidence in meetings, how to shake hands firmly, how to look people in the eye. But beneath all that, there were numbers, processes, structures she'd handled with a fluency I'd never really valued. Big clients started asking for follow-up meetings, questioning decisions, delaying payments. Some simply left. The story of the failed wedding turned into a sort of corporate urban legend. There were all kinds of versions, but in every one the common thread was the same: an unprofessional partner who mixed personal life and business and ended up dragging everything down. Scarlett, at first, stayed. She came with me to some meetings, kissed me behind closed doors as if nothing mattered, laughed at the whole drama. People forget fast, she'd say, stroking my neck, lips brushing my ear. What matters is you keep your head high. Her body was still an easy refuge, intense, a place where I could switch off the guilt for a while. Nights with her were a blend of need and escape, shared sweat and awkward silences afterward. But reality doesn't switch off in bed. When the financial statements truly turned ugly, when I started having to fire people, when cash flow began to choke, Scarlett changed. Her messages spaced out. Her visits to the office got fewer and farther between. One night, while I was going through invoices in my apartment, she wrote, "Brad, we need to talk." The classic line. The one that never means anything good. She showed up a bit later. Tight jeans, a light blouse, and that dangerous way of moving she had. She sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and looked at me with a mix of pity and exhaustion. "I don't want to go down with the ship," she said, blunt as ever. "I'm telling you like this because I know you hate people beating around the bush." Is that what we are? A sinking ship? I asked, feeling anger climb up inside me. "That's what your company is," she replied. You're something else. But I can't stay tied to a name that now means scandal and bad management." Bad management? I repeated, stung. All this happened because of the wedding, because. Don't lie to yourself, Brad, she cut in. The wedding was the spark. But the real problem is you thought you were invincible. You let everything revolve around you. Susan made this work. You made it look pretty. She said it with an almost affectionate tone, and that made it hurt more. Someone contacted me, she added after a pause. An investment fund. They want to get into the sector, buy distressed companies, restructure them. They asked about you. They contacted you? I asked. She hesitated for a second. That was enough for me to know she wasn't telling me everything. I'm good at making connections, Bradley, she said. And you, right now you're a story nobody wants to touch with tongs. I stayed quiet. I'm going to work with them, she finished. I can't stay here. She stood, came over to me, and kissed my forehead. A gesture almost tender, almost sibling-like. No fire. I'm sorry, she whispered. You're a man who hurt himself. I just pass through. And she left. Do you think people stay when everything collapses? Some do, I know. But many don't. Me, at that point, I was alone. The company finally went under a few months later. Unpayable accounts, lawsuits, furious suppliers. The brand that had once been a synonym for growth became the textbook example of how not to mix your personal life with your business. One day, I got a call from administrative management. Brad, we've received a purchase offer. The word offer sounded humiliating. Like someone wanting to buy what was left of a shipwreck. From who? I asked. The answer froze me. A new company, the manager said. Owl Strategic Holdings. The legal representative's name is Susan Miller. Susan. Owl. She'd put Owl on her new structure. Only now do I realize how ironic it is to be telling you this on WinOwl. They called me into a different boardroom. Not ours anymore, but a bank's glass walls, a high view over the city. Outside, everything kept moving. Inside, it felt like a trial. Susan was there. Light-colored suit this time, soft blouse, no flashy jewelry. Her hair down, falling in controlled waves. Her hands resting on the table, fingers interlaced. When I walked in, she looked up. Her eyes didn't hold hatred. They held something worse, distance. Brad, she greeted with a small nod. Thank you for coming. There was another folder on the table. Another proposal. Your company is technically bankrupt, she explained, in her usual professional tone. But it still has brand value, client portfolio, structure. My firm wants to acquire it, take on the debts, and keep some key jobs. I listened, and every word felt like another brick in the wall she'd built between us. Was this your plan from the beginning? I asked when she finished. Strip me of my assets, leave me holding this bomb, and then buy it for scrap value? Susan held my gaze for a few seconds. I gave you the chance to handle it, she said. You signed convinced you could. I just waited for the results. Does this feel fair to you? I pressed. Tell me the truth. She took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Justice, Brad, has nothing to do with what happened between you and me, she replied. If you ask me as a woman, as your ex-fiancée, no, I don't think any of what we went through was fair. Not what you did to me, not what I ended up doing either. She paused. But if you're asking me as a businesswoman, she went on, this is an opportunity. And I'm not going to turn down an opportunity because I feel sorry for someone who betrayed me. Her words were a slow knife. Scarlett works with you, doesn't she? I blurted out, before I could stop myself. For the first time, I saw her hesitate. Just for a second. Scarlett provides external consulting services, she admitted. She gave me information any investor would have sought. There it was. The full line. I had betrayed her. Scarlett had betrayed me. And Susan had used both as fuel. You know I'm bankrupt, right? I asked. I know you're close, she replied. This acquisition can help you wind things down with less pain. I leaned forward, feeling the edge of the table under my forearms. Look me in the eye and tell me, I asked, do you enjoy this? Susan looked at me. In her pupils I saw a reflection of myself, a tired man, in a suit that no longer fit quite right, dark circles, hands barely trembling. She swallowed. No, she said at last. I don't enjoy it. Her eyes shimmered just a little, like a tear had tried to form and gotten stuck halfway. But I don't regret it either, she finished. That sentence was the verdict. We signed. Again. Different context. This time, with my signature, I handed over the last thing I had left of that life we'd built together, the company name, the offices, the furniture, the shared professional dreams. When the process was done, the lawyer gathered the papers. We were alone for a few seconds. Susan stood, walked around the table, and stopped by my side. I felt her presence, but I didn't look at her. Brad, she said softly. I never wanted you to end up like this. But you didn't do anything to stop it either, I replied. She sighed. I warned you, she reminded me. I gave you options. You made the choices you made. I just reacted. Her fingers brushed the back of my chair, very close to my shoulder. For a moment, I felt an urge to grab her hand, to apologize, to beg for something. I'm not even sure what. But she left. And I stayed there, with the echo of her heels fading down the hallway, like the last soundtrack of our story. Today I'm speaking to you from a small rented apartment, with furniture I chose not for design but for price. I don't have a company. I don't have the social life I used to. I have debts I'm slowly paying off, taking whatever jobs I can without asking too many questions. And I have memories. Very good memories. Too good. Sometimes I ask myself at what exact moment my fall began. Was it in that hotel elevator, when I let Scarlett's knee keep brushing mine and didn't move away? Was it when I lied to Susan through a screen, looking her in the eye while she told me she missed me? Or was it long before that, when I decided life was a game and I'd always be able to control everything? I also ask myself how far what Susan did was justice, and how far it was revenge. She took everything material I had, yes. Or rather, she left me with the worst of it and then bought the ruins. She forced me to face my own limits as a professional and as a man. Did she cross a line? Or did she simply refuse to protect me from the consequences of my actions? You, listening now, with more distance and less emotion in the way, how do you see it? I think about her sometimes. Not just as that cold strategist who let me sink, but as the woman who would lean on my shoulder in the boardroom, who unbuttoned her blouse just a little at the end of the day to breathe easier, who pressed her forehead against my chest when something overwhelmed her and only allowed herself to be vulnerable with me. I think about Scarlett too, about her laugh, about her lips always ready for the next impulse, about her restless hands, about how easily she jumped from my bed to Susan's negotiating table. And I realized that, in the end, the problem wasn't them. It was me. I'm not telling you this to paint myself as a martyr. I'm saying it because when you strip away the drama and the headlines about a corporate scandal, what's left is pretty simple: a man who wanted to have everything, and ended up not knowing how to take care of anything. Sometimes at night, when the city finally calms down and all you can hear is the distant hum of cars, I close my eyes and picture another version of myself. A Brad who, that night at the hotel bar, would have stood up from the table, paid for his whiskey, gone up to his room alone, and called Susan just to tell her he missed her. Do you think that one small decision would have changed everything? I don't know. What I do know is this: there are mistakes that break companies, and there are mistakes that break people. Mine did both. Maybe that's what I struggle most to forgive myself for. Not losing the money, or the office, or the company logo. But losing the version of me that Susan saw when she still trusted me. I don't know if she ever loved me the way I thought she did. I don't know if, in some night of her new life, she thinks of me as anything more than a case study. But sometimes I comfort myself by thinking that, in some way, I changed her too. That the coldness she has now, that sharp mind, was also forged in the fire I started. I don't know if that's a comfort or a sentence. The only thing I'm sure of is that I'm no longer the man who thought nothing could touch him. I'm someone who tells his story in a low voice, maybe so it can serve as a warning to someone, maybe just so it doesn't disappear completely inside my own head. And this is where I ask you directly, you, who made it to the end of this confession. What would you have done in Susan's place? Would you have designed that perfect revenge, wrapped in contracts and cold signatures? Or would you have just walked away, trying not to become someone you don't want to be? And what would you have done in my place, when Scarlett showed up again in that almost white dress at my wedding? Would you have stopped the ceremony yourself? Would you have run after Susan? I need to read other perspectives, other verdicts. Sometimes we're too blind when it comes to our own story. If anything I've told you echoed inside you, if you saw even a piece of yourself in it, I invite you to leave it in the comments. Tell me if you think I deserved what happened to me, if you believe Susan was fair or cruel, what you'd say to a man like me so he doesn't repeat the same mistakes. And please, if these stories make you think, subscribe to the WinOwl channel, hit like on this video, and share it with someone who's mixed love with business or is about to. Maybe hearing this in time will save them from becoming the next Brad. I can't change what I've done. But maybe you can still change what you're about to do. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes a single decision, made in time, can save you from a whole life of quiet ruins.